Okay, well, I want to welcome everybody this afternoon to our presentation. My name is Sarah Flanagan. I know several of you. If not, I have interacted with all of you in some capacity. I am the Director of Community Health here at Clarkson, and I also run our IPE program. So I am super excited to have a nice variety of folks. You guys can't all see, but we have some people here in the classroom. We have the majority, of course, online, given that we are still in this kind of uncertain time with the pandemic. So I appreciate you all being here. We do have really good representation as well. When I looked at everybody who had signed up, we have faculty, staff, and students from all the different programs here at the college. So of course, nursing is the largest, but we have PTA students, radiography, community health, health education and leadership, healthcare business, the whole gamut. And so I'm really excited for everybody to be here today and to be part of this important message with our presenter, Jackie, who I will introduce here in just a minute. A couple of housekeeping items as we get started. If everybody would, I think it looks like we are online. Make sure that you mute your microphone if you're participating remotely. That just helps us avoid kind of background noise and distractions. However, Jackie would love it if you guys had your cameras on. We all know that it's hard to give a presentation to a blank wall. And sometimes with Zoom, it feels like that if everybody turns them off because we can't see people's reactions, facial expressions and whatnot. So if you're comfortable, it's okay if you're eating, if you're taking notes, whatever. If you feel comfortable online showing your faces, that would be much appreciated. We will have Jenny Kissinger, who's our counselor here. She's in the corner of the room here on campus. For those of you online, she will be monitoring our chat function. So as Jackie is sharing, if you have questions or comments, feel free to put those in the chat. It's not going to show up as Jesse's name. It's going to, or Jenny's name. That's my husband. He's not here. It's not going to be Jenny's name. It's going to show up as Sarah Flanagan because she's on my laptop. So just chat your questions that way. Jackie, our presenter, is comfortable with questions during the presentation as well as at the end. So maybe just kind of pay attention to when it seems like a good time to ask a question. As Jenny gets those through chat, she'll kind of pipe up and we can have those questions as well. And I can access them here from the front podium by the speaker. This is an IPE event. So for those of you either here in person or online who have finished your first 4 modules, this does count for either knowledge or community credit. So just remember to go in your reflections in module 5 in that IPE course. And we ask that you submit your reflection as soon as possible. You guys know there's a 90-day limit, which is actually kind of crazy because you're probably not going to remember every brilliant example that Jackie shares when it's 3 months from now. So if you can do that sooner than later, that would be appreciated. And that way I'll get you course credit. We also have a lot of people participating today who are already done with their IPE. They don't need it anymore, but they're still, of course, interested in this important topic. And so just a reminder to everyone that all the events, this is sponsored by Student Support Team, but Diversity Council, Student Activities, SGA, everything that we offer is for everyone all the time. So we don't want people just to do it for course credit. We want you to come and learn as much as you can while you're here with us at Clarkson College. We will have gift cards to give away at the end for our online and on-campus participants. So make sure you stick around till the end so we can give away some money. We've got $50 and 2 25s, which is a nice little perk. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for today, our guest speaker. Her name is Jackie Gordon. Jackie has been working in the domestic violence, sexual assault field for 8 years, starting as a shelter manager. She has been at the Women's Center for Advancement, the WCA, just a couple blocks from here, for the past 3 years now, working as a training coordinator, where she's able to provide educational opportunities for professionals. So talks just like this and others. And Jackie and I have been working together for about 2.5 years now since I moved into this role at the college, and she has been a great supporter of what we do here at Clarkson. She came and participated in our Vagina Monologues event for those of you who were in it, or those who came to watch. And so we're just really appreciative, Jackie, to have you here with us today. We thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. I will go ahead and turn off my camera and mute myself up front so that we can focus our attention on Jackie. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm really, really thrilled to be here today. This is one of my favorite parts of my job, is to just go over domestic violence 101, because I think it really gives people an opportunity to, if you don't know the exact definition and tactics of power and control at play in domestic violence, it's really a great opportunity to see a lot of light bulbs go off. So with that being said, if you do feel, a lot of you already have turned on your cameras, if you do feel comfortable turning them on, please do. I'm not judging anyone. The only reason I look clean is because I'm presenting outside of my agency, and I don't remember the last time I wore pants without stretching them. So like, I'm not judging you for eating, holding your dog, what you're wearing. If you feel comfortable, please do turn it on. It's just quite a bit easier to present when you can see some reactions. Also, so we are going to be doing a brief domestic violence hour long, but fairly brief. So I'm going to be kind of whirlwinding through it. But at the same time, please feel free to pop those questions into the chat. And I will stop and answer those questions. Also, I'll leave a little room at the end for further questions. And then we'll stay as late as needed to continue to answer questions past 5 p.m. if necessary. And then last thing I want to let you know is that this can be a very triggering discussion for folks. If you yourself or loved ones have experienced domestic violence, sexual assault, other crimes of power and control, this can really trigger you to kind of re-experience those things again. So if at any point in time you need to step away, take care of yourself, please do. You're always welcome to come back. At any point in time. You're also more than welcome not to come back, because we completely understand that. With that being said, I also do share stories here and there from my past work when I was still working direct service with clients. I want to let you know that I have the permission to share these very general stories, and also most of them are from clients that were out of state, because I started out of state. And I like to try to share those stories I have permission versus the ones that have happened in Omaha, because it's far less likely that you'll identify them. So also want to preface with that. Do we have any questions before I get moving on? All right. All right. Everyone can see my slide just fine? Cool. So just some things you need to know about domestic violence. Just a couple of statistics. So it is incredibly common. Most people don't realize just how common experiencing domestic violence is. So this depiction is that 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. So 1/3, 33% of women experience domestic violence in their lifetime. And this slide doesn't even talk about men who experience domestic violence. So that's about 1 in 7. Just to let you know, so still staggering numbers, but less than half, or they more than double the amount of women tend to experience statistically at this point domestic violence than men. However, I would argue that there's a lot of underreporting when it comes to men experiencing domestic violence. So those are just some things to think of. Also, when we're talking on such a binary of men and women, we're leaving out an entire population as well. Those who don't identify as men and women, we're leaving out we're leaving out a whole population of people who have different statistics. So just some things to think about. Another thing to note is that women ages 16 to 24 experience the highest rates of domestic violence, and it can affect anyone. So with this being said, we really need to move towards that gender inclusive language. So men can experience domestic violence, women can be perpetrators of domestic violence. Non-binary and trans folks experience domestic violence and can be perpetrators of domestic violence. It happens in every socioeconomic class, in every culture, in every race, in every part of this country. It happens absolutely everywhere. So it doesn't matter what demographic you belong to, it happens in those demographics. And then also, before we start diving more into domestic violence and what it looks like, I want to make sure that we cover some really common myths or misnomers about domestic violence. So one of the things that you hear a lot is that it's an anger issue, that people who abuse can't control their anger. And I would argue that this is absolutely not true. So when I would talk to some of my clients and they'd be like, oh, well, you know, they destroyed my house. They just couldn't control their anger. You know, they went on a rampage in our house. A question I would ask a lot of times is, can you tell me a little bit more about what they destroyed in your house? And then the client most of the time would say something along the lines of, well, they destroyed my clothing, my grandmother's china, my TV, my PlayStation, my X, Y, and Z. And so what I would then tell clients is, gosh, it sounds like they had a lot of control over their anger because it was very, very targeted. They chose to only break your things. So when we talk about anger management issues, you know, that person is screaming at their boss. They are screaming at the cashier at Target. They are struggling to maintain relationships with friends and family because of those anger issues. Whereas oftentimes perpetrators of domestic violence are revered by their community, have tons of loved ones and friends, but abused in the privacy of their own homes. So these are people who are clearly targeting their violence towards one individual. It's caused by alcohol or drug use is another myth. So another thing my clients would say is, well, they only got violent when they, you know, were high on meth after we'd been smoking. And I'd be like, okay, so, you know, that's when they tend to get physically violent. They'd be like, yeah. And I'd pull out my power and control wheel and be like, so can you, let's look at this power and control wheel. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, they did that and that and that, oh my gosh, and that too. And so what we would soon learn is that the abuse was happening even while that person was sober. It's just that drugs and alcohol exacerbate it and make it more violent, make it worse. So it's not caused by drug and alcohol use, but it certainly is exacerbated by drug and alcohol use. I mean, plenty of us have been out drinking, plenty of us have been intoxicated. And if we're not abusive people, we don't abuse our loved ones when we're intoxicated, right? So it is not caused by drugs and alcohol. Some people are like, oh, it's just a dysfunctional relationship. It's just a toxic relationship. They're just not getting along. They just argue all the time. It's mutually abusive, those kinds of conversations. This is clearly one person seeking power and control over another person. This is not just these people don't get along and they argue. This is someone is trying to actively control another person. It only happens in certain relationships. We've already kind of talked about this. This can happen across all different types of relationships. And it's the last myth is it's something you can cause to happen. So no one can cause domestic violence to happen to them. This is the choice of the perpetrator. So you'll see a lot of times survivors and perpetrators will do something blaming the victim for the abuse that they're experiencing. Oh, if you had just done the dishes, I wouldn't have had to hit you. Or if you hadn't flirted with a cashier, this abuse wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had to do this to you. So oftentimes the survivor is blamed for that. And eventually the survivor starts to blame themselves. Well, I know they get upset when I make eye contact with another person in public, and I made eye contact. I know that, you know, when I talk to my mom on the phone for a long period of time, they get angry at me. So, you know, I just shouldn't have done that. It was my fault. So just to be very clear, this is not something that someone can cause to happen to them. This is something that someone chooses to do to them. And there's just no, they can't cause it to happen. And so therefore survivors cannot stop the abuse from happening to them either. So I've already, cat's out of the bag. I think I've said it 20 times, but what do you think domestic violence is about? And please feel free to unmute yourself to answer this question. Oh, it looks like we're getting a lot of chats. Power and control. We've got control as well. Perfect. So yes, you're right. Like I said, I've said it a few times already. Domestic violence is all about power and control. So when we're looking at those dynamics, this is the definition we need to keep in mind. So it is a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain and maintain power and control over the other partner. Domestic violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, or economic, and many other things. It could be spiritual. It could be a whole lot of different things. So what this tells us is that physical violence does not have to be there for it to be considered domestic violence. It is tactics used to gain and maintain power and control. Also, something I want to point out before we really start diving into those tactics too, is that it is a pattern of abusive behavior. So when we go over this power and control wheel, you might have a lot of like light bulbs that go off for you in your own relationships or in your loved ones' relationships or in things you've seen in the past, but you also might go, oh God, I've done this or that or this. And that's okay. That does not mean you are an abuser. Now, it is, once again, it is a pattern to gain and maintain power and control. So just because you have manipulated someone to choose a different restaurant or to maybe get your way in a situation, just because you've used a tactic of manipulation doesn't necessarily mean you're abusive. We've all done things like that before. It's really about that pattern. So before we dive into sorry, I forgot about one more slide before we get into the power and control wheel. So real quick, some characteristics to think about when we're talking about people who abuse. There's an entitlement, and it's very self-centered around how they get their needs met, how they control everything in their lives and in their partner's lives. They're incredibly possessive. And so oftentimes jealousy is like oh, well, I reacted that way because I'm jealous, and I'm jealous because I love you and I don't want to lose you. That is also being very possessive. So they are possessive. They treat their partners as if they belong to them. They're incredibly manipulative, not only of their partners, but everyone around them. So oftentimes we don't believe that people are experiencing abuse because their abusive partner is someone that we love and care about. And it's sometimes hard to really face that people we love and care about can be abusive. They externalize responsibility. They're never going to hold themselves accountable for their abuse. And there's always going to be an excuse as to why that abuse was okay or why that abuse wasn't abuse. There is a confusion of love and abuse. Well, I am jealous of you, so therefore I love you because I don't want to lose you. Oftentimes this comes from witnessing relationships when one is younger as well as being abusive. So growing up in an abusive home and seeing that familial love means that there's abuse involved, or having those relationships modeled where this is what a loving relationship is supposed to look like. Because we all learn from how things were modeled for us as a child. And then serial perpetration. So if someone is abusive to one partner, they were abusive to the partner before that, and they're going to be to the partner after that. So when we're talking about abuse, serial perpetration is real. They don't just stop abusing one day. Now, am I saying that abusers can never be reformed or decide to make changes in their life or have a wake-up call? Absolutely, they can. Of course, anyone can decide to make changes in their life, but serial perpetration is a characteristic of abusers. And once again, that kind of calls back that idea that that one partner is not responsible for the abuse and did nothing specific to cause that abuse because they've abused the partner before that and they're going to abuse the partner after that. Does that make sense? Perfect. And I think I saw something pop up in chat. Let me see. Narcissism as a characteristic. Yes, a lot of people refer to narcissism as a characteristic of abuse, or like narcissistic parents or things like that. This all kind of ties into that. So yes, narcissism definitely tends to be a characteristic of abuse, but not for all abusers. So like, yes, this tends to be the general abuser, but there's also tons of different types of abusers. If you read Lundy Bancrofts, why does he, this is gendered language, but why does he do that? He goes through, he did thousands and thousands of interviews with different abusers and knows their abuse tactics. And he actually came up with different types of abusers. If you really want to get into the nitty gritty, like there's like the narcissistic abuser, the survivalist, the tons of different things. But yeah, narcissism is definitely out there. Did that answer your question, whoever asked it? You can respond in the chat or verbally, however you want. Perfect. Sorry, I have to click multiple times to get this to switch back over. All right. So when we are looking at the power and control wheel, it was developed by Ellen Pence in Duluth, Minnesota, many years ago. And she even says to this day that if she could change it, she would change power and control to entitlement power and control, because they feel entitled to doing this to someone. So the power and control wheel, I kind of call it like the holy grail or the Bible of domestic violence work. So when we're looking at the power and control wheel, we see that power and control is at the center of everything. That is the goal, that is the motivation. And then on the very outside, on the edge of the wheel or the crust of the pie, you'll see physical and sexual violence. So I've already said that physical violence does not have to be present. Physical and sexual violence do not need to be present for it to be considered domestic violence, but there's kind of this feeling that, or fear of physical and sexual violence, or knowing that there could possibly be these consequences if I don't follow whatever they say, follow their rules. So domestic violence does not need to be physical in any way. It can be purely emotional, mental abuse. And then the slices of pie are the tactics. So I'm kind of just going to speed through those because we're almost halfway through and I want to make sure you get some bystander intervention as well. So anger and emotional abuse is going to be name calling, put downs. It is going to be the yelling, the screaming, telling people they're worthless and not lovable. And obviously this is just a very skimming, like it goes much deeper than this. Some pieces of the pie different tactics can fit in different pieces of the pie or multiple pieces. And there's way more to these examples than just what I'm giving. Using social status or privilege. So this could be forcing gender roles, on traditional gender roles onto people who don't want to fulfill those gender roles. So forcing someone to work and be the bread maker, or forcing someone to stay at home with the kids and cook and clean. This could be using other types of social status. So this could be threatening to out your partner to their friends and family if they're a part of the LGBTQ community. This could be, I had a survivor in and out of my shelter who was a multi-millionaire, but had no access to any of her money. And the reason she was in and out of the shelter, and one of the barriers to her leaving, was that her partner was revered by our entire community, like so revered by this community that I couldn't tell you who this person was, because even in a totally different state, someone in this chat would probably know about this person or who they are. So she did not feel safe seeking a divorce. She did not feel safe seeking a protection order or any sort of legal guidance because of who her partner was, because no one would believe her. Everyone would support her partner, the judge, the police, whoever it was. So using that social status to continue to abuse someone. Intimidation. Intimidation can look a lot of different ways. It can be just a look. It could be a totally neutral look. But, you know, if the police show up because someone called in because they could hear you fighting in your apartment, and yes, the police may separate the two of you, but all the abuser has to do is just look, even just a sustained look for a second, certainly sends a message and intimidates that survivor to not say anything. It could be throwing things. It could be a gesture. like this or like this, but not ever doing anything. So that's what intimidation can absolutely look like. Displaying weapons. So one thing I want to make clear about displaying weapons is that a kitchen knife and a knife block is not a weapon. A kitchen knife on the arm of your lazy boy is a weapon, and it's sending a message. Polishing a gun when you walk in the door, cleaning the gun that they've maybe threatened you with before, or just having a gun can sometimes be a form of intimidation. A baseball bat in the garage is sporting equipment. I was like, sporting tool, what? I don't do sports ball. But a baseball bat in the garage is sporting equipment. A baseball bat next to the bed sends a message. I'm in a really healthy relationship. My husband's amazing. And if I walked into our bedroom and I saw a baseball bat, if we owned a baseball bat, if I saw a baseball bat sitting next to our bed, my first response would be, oh my God, what happened? Are we not safe? Like, what do we need to be doing right now? But to a survivor who's not in a healthy relationship, who might be afraid, that sends a message of, I might hurt you. I'm thinking about possibly hurting you. Minimizing, denying, and blaming. So I think this is fairly self-explanatory in the sense that abusers are going to minimize the abuse they perpetrate. I used an open hand, it wasn't that bad. Denying, I didn't say that in front of our friends. I didn't take that tone of voice with you. The abuse that I've perpetrated never happened. Didn't happen. Or blaming. So, well, if you hadn't done this or if you had done that, this wouldn't be happening to you. You flirted with that person that you was just ringing you up at the grocery store. If you hadn't flirted with them, well, I wouldn't have hit you. I wouldn't have taken your kids. I wouldn't have done X, Y, or Z. And then survivors start to do the same thing to themselves. They start to minimize what's happening to them. It starts to normalize. They start to blame themselves for the abuse and truly believing that they're responsible for it. Gaslighting falls under minimizing, denying, and blaming, as well as like emotional abuse as well. So gaslighting can also sometimes be called crazy making, but the term for it is gaslighting. And it's basically you are making someone question their own reality, question their own gut instincts and feelings and responses to their reality. And it could be as simple as saying that never happened. What are you talking about? You're crazy. And go from there, and can be even much worse than that. Threats take so many different forms. I'm going to call CPS and have the children taken away because you have a substance use disorder. I am going to report you to ICE because you're undocumented. I am going to do X, Y, and Z to hurt you, to hurt our pets, to hurt our children, to hurt your family. These threats have so many different dynamics, and different situations are so different that I couldn't even begin to go over the different types of threats that someone could use to control another person. But those are some good examples, like using immigration status, using children as threats, threatening to hurt your pets is real. Abusers hurt and abuse and kill pets all the time. Same with children. If domestic violence is present in the home, 60 to 70% of abusers also abuse their children. So it's actually really great. It's an indicator that child abuse is happening in the home as well. One threat I always do like to highlight is that if an abuser is threatening to kill themselves, to die by suicide, that is particularly lethal for survivors, because oftentimes if an abuser decides to complete suicide, they also are going to harm and possibly kill the survivor as well. And I have actually had that happen to one of my clients in the past, where the abuser had been threatening that and ended up murdering their 3-year-old child, and then dying by suicide, completing suicide. So those threats are very real and very dangerous. Sexual coercion is real as well. So survivors oftentimes don't feel safe saying no to their partners. So I would always question in a domestic violence relationship, do survivors have the ability to say no to their partners or not? Even if they want to, can the abuser ever know if that yes is because they actually want to give consent or because they're afraid not to provide consent? So those are kind of some dynamics to think about. Some other forms of sexual coercion, well, we haven't had sex in a while, you must be getting it somewhere else. Or, well, if you don't provide me sex, I'm gonna go get it somewhere else. Using sex to manipulate, to force people into having sex, which looks totally, it doesn't always look like force in the sense of what we see in shows and movies, like the please don't, no kind of thing. It can be as simple as a look. It could be as simple as just being afraid to say no to your partner means that you're not giving consent. So sexual coercion is also usually present in domestic violence. When I went through my first trainings, when I first got into the field, you have to go through 40 hours of training plus other trainings to be an advocate, to work with survivors per like national coalition standards. And one of the things that my trainer said to me that has stuck with me these 8 years was, if you believe domestic violence happens in the living room, happens in the kitchen, what makes you think it stops at the bedroom door? So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Isolation and exclusion is huge. Not allowing you to see friends. It usually happens small and then grows, like, oh, come on, I haven't seen you in so long. Like, let's hang out, let's spend time together, which is a real relationship concern. But when it gets to be every time you go out with your friends, then it starts turning into, well, your mom really doesn't like me, so you know, don't go hang out with her because I know she's just going to talk bad about me. And then time goes by and pretty soon you're not allowed to talk to anybody. Your friends and family start to fall away because they're upset or angry with you, tired of it, don't understand because they might not know domestic violence is happening. So they think you're abandoning them. So like control over communication and where people go. I had an abuser who would literally measure the tires on the driveway to be able to tell if their partner took the car out or not, which I was always kind of like, it's called an odometer. It's a little easier, but stupid. Maybe the odometer was broken and I'm not giving them enough credit, but like controlling where people go, making sure they don't leave the house, tracking them on cell phones with GPS, putting GPS on their car. You know, there's just so many different tactics. Providing someone with money and then making them bring the receipt from the store they went to with the exact change back. Forms of control as well as isolation to make sure you know where they're going. Peer pressure. So this particularly applies to teens. You know, maybe someone is dating the star quarterback or dating someone who is very renowned in the community you're in. So using that peer pressure of so-and-so would never, ever do that is very real. And also when we're looking at adult relationships, a lot of times this is replaced with financial abuse. So this is forcing someone to work, not allowing someone to work, providing them with an allowance that you don't have. So like if my husband were to give me an allowance, but he didn't have an allowance and could spend money however he wanted, that would be a form of financial abuse. Making big purchases like houses and cars and deciding to move across the country for a new job without consulting partners, financial abuse. Stalking people at work, getting them fired from jobs because of abuse, stopping them from going to school to get the training or certification that they need to have the jobs that they want. So this could be reporting them to welfare for fraud or other things so that they lose, you know, Title 20, TANF, sorry, here it's ADC, losing those kinds of SNAP, losing those kinds of benefits. So any questions about the power and control wheel? I know it was a whirlwind. I could do 40 hours on just the power and control wheel and its dynamics. So any questions before we move on? All right. Where's my, sorry, I'm trying to like find my pointer. Found it. One of the questions that people ask a lot is like, why don't they just leave? If it's so bad, why wouldn't you leave? Just a second. Do you find that I had the question, do you find that the majority of abusers are people of higher social status? Are you talking about, if we're talking like in relationships in general, no. Like, are we talking about like, is it always a judge or a police officer or, you know, whoever is revered, a principal of a school, a mayor? Not necessarily, but a lot of times what you'll see is abusers using whatever type of status they have over their partner. So like if you look at, for instance, my husband and I, sorry, I use us as an example just because I feel comfortable because we're in a healthy relationship and it's my story. It'd be like my husband who doesn't have a bachelor's degree. I have more education than him and more experience in my field than he does. It'd be like me using that against him, or him using the fact that he actually makes way more money. Welcome to nonprofit world. He makes way more money than I do. He would use that against me. He would use his status as a cis heterosexual man against me. So whatever social status that they may or may not have, they often try to use against that person while glossing over the social status that the survivor might have over them. Did that answer that question? Okay, cool. Can you give the stats again on the parent-child abuse that might take place together? So there are studies that say that 60 to 70% of abusers also abuse their own children. Any other questions? All right. Oh, wait, maybe? Oh, yep, you're absolutely welcome. And it looks like we do have another question. So the question was, is it true that LGBTQ relationships experience higher rates, and specifically lesbian couples, I'm assuming is what that means. So I don't know the higher rates in terms of off the top of my head. I could find them for you, but in terms of like, oh, you know, if someone is in a, if two women are in a relationship versus a man and a woman in a relationship, I don't know those as well, but I can tell you some statistics about the LGBTQ community. The one that always really sticks in my head is that 50% of bisexual women will experience sexual assault in their life. So you do tend to see higher rates in terms of the experience of violence for people who belong to marginalized communities. So we're talking women, or we're talking the LGBTQ community. We're talking about, you know, non-English speaking communities. We're talking about people with disabilities. You're gonna see them experiencing violence at higher rates. Now, I don't have this exact statistics about like specific types of relationships and the rates within those specific types of relationships. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if it wasn't and I'll try to expand. Why don't they just leave? So this is a really common question that people ask of survivors, and I want us to completely erase this question from our brains. We don't ask this for multiple reasons, because one thing is like, well, why don't you leave? Kind of says like, well, you're stupid for not leaving. It must not be that bad, so why would I believe you? Because if it was that bad, you would leave. Also, it's not really the question we should be asking. The question we should be asking instead should put the responsibility onto the abuser and not on the survivor. So the question really we should be asking is, why did they abuse? Why are they abusing? And there's so many different barriers to leaving. So first and foremost, leaving in an abusive relationship is dangerous. In the first 2 to 3 months after leaving in an abusive relationship, your odds of homicide go up 70%. Leaving an abusive relationship is one of the most dangerous times, and oftentimes it's safer at that time for the survivor to stay until they have a solid plan, a good support system, whatever it looks like for that survivor. So leaving is incredibly dangerous. Another thing that trainers said to me that has stuck with me forever is never underestimate someone's love for their abuser. Survivors love their partners. It used to be really good. In fact, they wouldn't be in an abusive relationship if it was abusive from the first second they got together. So oftentimes these start as fairy tale romances, appears to be the best relationship you've ever had in your life. And then it leads to this. So, there's a lot of hope and love there that they can get back to the relationship they had at the beginning. Lack of social support is real. Not having anyone to support them. Lack of economic resources is one of the #1 cited reasons by survivors. So lack of self-sufficiency because of the abuse. Culture or religion against divorce or against separating from your partner. A friends group, say you all have the same friends. Maybe you were originally friends in this big group of friends. Who's going to take whose side? That's kind of adds to that peer pressure idea. That group might not believe you, what has happened to you, and blame you for it. And then soon you lose your support system because you left an abusive partner. The effects of emotional abuse, so that minimizing, denying, and blaming is very real. And actually there's brain science behind it with neural pathways in our brains. Your abuser tells you you're worthless, you're stupid, no one else is going to love you every day of your life. It builds neural pathways in your brain that are start firing up on their own. And pretty soon you don't need your abuser to tell you these things because your brain is. CBT is amazing. You can change neural networks, but this is real. The effects of emotional abuse are incredibly detrimental. It means leaving your home. It means leaving pets. It means leaving community. It means possibly having to go through a divorce where your children get unsupervised visitation with your abuser and maybe their own abuser. And it's safer for you to be that barrier. So also pets are real. People don't want to leave their pets. Only emotional support you have. We all love our pets. I don't have children. I don't want children. My pets are my children. And I don't know if I could leave them. So some things to think about in a healthy relationship. I'm literally just going to list these off for time purposes. Trust, communication, space, being given space when you need space alone, away from them. Support, respect, equality, the respect of boundaries when they are set, consent always, and taking responsibility for your own actions. So if I hurt my partner, taking responsibility of my actions and how I hurt my partner is a huge part of a healthy relationship. All right, we're going to talk about helping others. So this is that bystander intervention piece. So this, I think, is sometimes really frustrating for people. Because people are like, well, what if my friend, my loved one, a coworker is experiencing domestic violence? What should I do? And a lot of people are like, I'm ready to help them pack their bags. Let's get them out of here. Let's get a go bag. Let's help them escape. And that's just not what that looks like unless they're asking for that support. But if someone discloses to you or anything like that, reach out to them, stay in contact with them. I have a good friend of mine who I was the maid of honor at her wedding. My husband was the officiant, long-term good friends, and within 6 months of that marriage, gone. It's been about 2 years, and I still periodically text her just to be like, hey, thinking about you, missing you, how are you doing? Let me know if you're available for coffee. And she's all like, oh yeah, I'm so busy. Yeah, I miss you too. And I know I did not do anything egregious enough to lose one of my best friends. right? Nothing that we couldn't talk about. Obviously, I'm not perfect, but nothing to do that. So I'm really concerned for her. And so my way of reaching out, I have had conversations with her in person during the beginning of, I'm worried that this is what's happening. So she knows my concerns. It was told to her in a way that the abuser wasn't able to read her text messages or listen in on the phone calls. And then from then on out, all I'm doing is letting her know I'm reaching out. I'm still here. I'm still here. Even if you're isolated, I'm not abandoning you. I am still here and someone you can call. You need to start by believing them too. Oftentimes survivors are not believed. Oftentimes you might be the only person who believes them. And if you are like me, where I'm good friends with both parties. In fact, I was friends with who I think may be an abuser before I was friends with the person who I think is being abused, and I introduced them. And I think my good friend, who is clearly not a good friend of mine anymore, is an abuser. And the fact of the matter is that people don't disclose domestic violence if it's not actually happening. So we have to believe them. And it's really hard sometimes though, when that person who is the abusive person, it's hard to come to terms with that fact that someone you love and care about isn't who you thought they were. Respect their privacy. Don't tell other people. Not only is this about keeping them emotionally safe so that they can still trust you, but if you tell other people and it gets back to the abuser, this could be life or death for that survivor. That could be life or death for your friend. Listen to them without judgment. Survivors do what they have to do to survive. And sometimes we're not going to understand those decisions, but we're not going to judge them for them because we're not them. We don't understand why, we're not in their situation and they know their situation best. So we're going to listen non-judgmentally and we're going to stick by them. We're going to support them and we're going to connect them to resources. So like the WCA or the Ponca Tribes Domestic Violence Program. Heartland Family Service has a domestic violence program down in Sarpy County. Whoever makes sense for that person, we're going to get them connected to those resources. So a lot of times people find this really frustrating, but this is literally the best thing you can do. Listen non-judgmentally, love them, stay with them, support them, get them resources, and then provide whatever support they think that you're able to and that they have expressed the need of. With that, also some things not to do. Don't pretend the abuse isn't happening. Don't blame or attack the abuser. Don't tell them what to do. Don't tell the survivor what to do. That's a principle of even the services that the WCA provides. This person's life is all about power and control. They're being told what to do by their partner all the time. So we want to be the last ones to control their life and what they do. And then don't give up. So there are things you can do as a bystander if you're noticing something happening out in public or in a group. And a lot of times I talk through the scenarios with people, but I'm going to give you some scenarios and just kind of tell you what I would maybe do. But it looks different for everyone. These are just some kinds of strategies to keep in mind. And the reason I'm doing that is because we are running out of time because I am a talker. So some things you can do, you can interrupt the situation. And a lot of times I try to interrupt in ways that are maybe not as direct, that maybe seem more like casual. If you are interrupting something and it is dangerous and you feel like you need to get someone out of that situation, talk to the survivor. Talk directly to them. And then last but not least, if you need to get help, get help. If you don't feel safe, don't do it alone. If you are a shy person and don't feel like you can casually interrupt because that gives you anxiety or, that's just not your style, maybe go grab your friend who is more like me, who's like a total loudmouth, and is willing to do that and go with you to do that. That is a form of getting help, seeking out police intervention, last absolute resort. But it could mean that. It just depends on your situation. So here are some examples of bystander intervention that is super, super simple. So guys in your friend group are making degrading comments about women or calling each other names that imply they are weak, like girls. We know what name we're using. It's the P word. I hate that word. Honestly, confront these people. This isn't funny. This is degrading. Isn't it interesting that men, the worst thing you can call a man is a woman? Doesn't that really say something about our views on women? So, interrupting these. When I get inappropriate comments, so I had a Nebraska state senator in college ask if we were his groupies when we were lobbying at the unicameral, and right, this is a senator, a state senator, and what I did was, I'm sorry, sir, I don't know what that means. Could you explain it to me? It's one of my favorite things to do. It works well with racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, everything. Like if someone says something inappropriate like that, if you make them real uncomfortable and have to explain exactly what they're saying, they're gonna feel real uncomfortable, and it's a great way to call people out. It's my favorite. So yeah, speak up. We want to change how the language we use and how we talk about people, whether it's women, whether it is the LGBTQ community, whether it's race, X, Y, Z, doesn't matter. If you're noticing those isms, say something. You're at a party and someone nearby has had a lot to drink and is being taken upstairs by someone else. This is where I would interrupt. This is where if I didn't feel safe, I would bring a friend, but I'd be like, oh, hey, Jane, where are you going? What's going on? You know what? I'm going to take care of Jane and take her home, or John and take him home, depending on the situation, especially if you're friends with them. And stop that from happening to that person. So honestly, just speaking up, or if you don't know that person that's being taken upstairs, the first thing I would do is say, hey, I know this other person who knows that person. I'm going to point it out to them and see if they are comfortable with it, or maybe they're dating or they have a relationship that would be appropriate. Because like if my husband was going to help me upstairs because I was too intoxicated, let my husband help me upstairs because I'm too intoxicated. But that is different in different relationships. So, start asking people, and if those people who know them better might feel more comfortable interjecting. Your friend jokes about slapping their boyfriend when he talks about other girls. So we see this a lot in teens where girls are very, very possessive and joke about slapping and hitting their boyfriends. So once again, this is really that piece of saying something. Honestly, say something, or getting someone else to say something, or getting someone who is maybe an authority figure, whether it's work, school, whatever, in to help you out. And then this is one that I do a lot when it's totally people you don't know. Say you're in the grocery store and you see a couple arguing, and when I say it appears to be one-sided, what I mean is specifically that someone is being yelled at, and it is not just your average argument. It feels uncomfortable. It maybe feels like one person is being belittled by another person. I've done this before in grocery stores where I've been like, oh, excuse me, I just need to reach up in there. And we'll grab something on the shelf from like between the two of them and just kind of look at a survivor and be like, hey, you okay? And if they're like, yeah, I'm fine and uncomfortable, I walk away. But what I have at least done is I brought to the attention of the abuser that I'm looking at you. And it gives that survivor either an out with me that is hopefully not too dangerous for them, but also might stop that abuse in that moment so that they can collect themselves, think about what they need to do to make sure that they're safe when they go home with that person, tons of different things. So intervening is really about every single different type of intervention you can do at different levels, whether it is you directly intervening, whether it is someone you know who is more comfortable directly intervening, you all intervening together as a group. I would suggest to try not to intervene in really aggressive ways because that can be dangerous for survivors. So like if I had walked into that fight in the grocery store and instead of being like, excuse me, and reaching between them, if I had gone up to the abuser and been like, who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing? That could have made things a lot worse for that survivor when they get home. So whirlwind bystander intervention, DV 101. Changing culture. Last thing I want to talk to you all about. So we see it in the Me Too movement that is still happening. The Time's Up movement, these things are still happening and we're still having these conversations. So get involved in these conversations. Pay attention to the news, be a good bystander, keep up with legislation and policies coming out. We've had a lot of legislation around domestic violence, sexual assault the past couple of years. And then also think with an intersectional lens too, about maybe this isn't directly related, but how would this affect survivors? And change conversations. That kind of goes back to that bystander. Don't accept sexist, homophobic, ableist, racist language from people you love and care about. Speak out, change those conversations, redirect them. Yeah. So at the WCA, we offer free services to survivors and primary survivors in the form of advocacy, financial aid, therapy, support groups, self-sufficiency. I mean, really, our goal is to free legal services, free immigration services, everything is free. So, you know, we really cater to that individual's needs to serve them best. And then if we can't provide a service, we're going to find someone who can, to the best of our ability, of course, if that service is out there. So here's our information. So I think I saw something pop up in chat. Let me see what I'm seeing. See what was said. So are there any universal signs or phrases that are used by survivors that we would want to be aware about if they are trying to reach out for help without their abuser knowing? So there's a lot of those kinds of things. And this is also opinion a la Jackie. So just, just throwing that out there. And we don't really promote them at the WCA either. So, but like, you know, they've shown like this symbol for someone on video chat. They've talked about the ordering a pizza from 911, that one really intuitive operator understood what was happening and was able to ask, like most of those clips of that don't show all the questions the operator is asking. Like, are you unable to ask for help right now? Yes. Would you like me to send you help? Yes. Perfect. So I've got that pepperoni pizza for you. Would you like anything else? You know, they're asking probing yes or no questions to make sure that they're sending the right help to that survivor. And I'm not sure if that's really super universal. People have also talked about like angel shots in bars, like this person's scaring. It's like supposed to be a signal to the bartender, like I need someone to walk me to my car. I need you to call someone. This person's scaring me, like different types of angel shots. But honestly, like I work this field and I don't remember all of them. So I would say there's really no universal signal. I think, you know, if it's your loved one, having a private conversation that can't be read or overheard is going to be really important, and approaching it from a place of love and care. I'm concerned about your safety is important. And also knowing red flags is really important as well. So like jealousy, whirlwind relationship, isolation, constant texting and calling, things like that and more are definitely things to watch out for, to know when those conversations need to happen. Did that answer your universal question?
Yes.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Glad to hear that. For bystander intervention, what would you suggest if it was in a child-adult scenario? So are you talking about like child abuse is happening, like a parent is abusing their child? So really call the hotline. It is in the state of Nebraska. Everyone 19 years of age or older are all mandatory reporters, no matter your licensure or profession. So like I know in the state I used to work in, it was like, if you're a licensed social worker, if you're a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, you have to report. You're a mandatory reporter. In the state of Nebraska, you're a mandatory reporter. So you can't really take that child away from their parent. Like that's kidnapping. It's harder to intervene. I would still, if it's in public, use similar kind of intervention techniques, subtle techniques that kind of show that person I'm looking at you. But I would definitely for sure call the child abuse hotline, because at the end of the day, we have to protect some of the most vulnerable people in this world are children. Well, I would say absolutely 100%, and oftentimes don't have the resources to do that themselves. So hotlines are important. And if you're ever going, oh, should I call or should I not call? My recommendation would be that that's not really your role to know whether or not that's child abuse or needs action. That is the role of the investigator that may or may not be sent out based off of that trained professional on the hotline's opinion and the questions they ask you. Did that answer your question? Okay, good. I'm glad. Yeah, it's a little harder because when you're talking about minors, you're talking about mandatory reporting to make sure that they're safe. And I know that's complicated too, because sometimes we don't want to get CPS involved because we know how detrimental being in foster care or experiencing those systems. It's complicated, but at the end of the day, we have to protect children with whatever tools we have. Can you touch on how mandatory reporting doesn't necessarily apply with adults who are not elderly or vulnerable? So yeah, mandatory reporting, absolutely not with adults. So if someone is an adult who is experiencing domestic violence, do not call the police. This is incredibly dangerous for survivors. You really need to be talking to them about what they see as something that could help them stay safe. In fact, I really try to avoid calling the police at all, even if you hear like a really loud fight next door. Sometimes the police being called is good. Sometimes that could make it worse in the end. So I try to involve police as little as possible. But if I think someone's going to die, someone is going to get seriously hurt, absolutely call the police in that moment. That homicidal, suicidal harm piece. But outside of that, like the WCA does not call the police. You are not forced to report anything, because we also know that our system and our police system and our judicial system oftentimes chews survivors up and spits them out because they're not exactly built for them. Sometimes people find justice, and sometimes it works great for people, but not always. Back to what you said about causing increased potential for violence. Yep. Okay. Would you suggest for a bystander to a loved one who is being abused but is out of state, only able to? Okay, so yeah, only able to text, call, etc. to reach out. So I would, so you can get more information. We serve secondary survivors at the WCA, so we offer all the same services. But also, if you need support and like, how do I show support further than what I'm about to say? Call us. We will absolutely step you through like what is going to help survivors, what you can do for that person who's out of state. I would provide them with the national hotline. They also do texting. I think chat typing. They also should have a domestic violence agency assigned to their county, wherever they live. So if they're urban, like in an urban area, so like Omaha or New York, there should be tons of resources there. If they're in more rural areas, it might be 2 counties away, but they have an assigned agency and hotline for them. Provide them those kinds of resources. You can also come up with tactics, code words with them. So this is kind of my go-to phrase. It doesn't work for everyone, but it's kind of stupid and the point is it's supposed to be benign. Like, come up with a plan with them. If you text me and say like, do you have any good crock pot recipes? If they text you saying that, is that their signal to you that they're unsafe and they need, you to call 911 for them, or to call their neighbor for them, or to call the home phone number to intervene in a way that's like, hey, I do totally have some crock pot recipes. Let's talk. If the abuser is going to let them pick up the phone, because maybe that's a way to maintain that normality. So really safety planning with them in that way that fits their personal needs and their personal situation, because everyone's situation is different. So I don't know if that was super helpful or not, but loving them, providing support, making sure their ways of communication are safe, whether that is texting, calling, things like that, and then helping them find resources in their area. What do you suggest nurses do in the ER when they suspect domestic abuse, but the patient won't talk about it? First off, I would get them alone, because oftentimes the abuser comes with them. So they aren't going to be safe. So you know, you're a nurse, you can make up so many things that are like, hey, this is the part of, you know, the examination where I'm going to need you to step out of the room. COVID is also helping with that too, because I'm assuming that a lot of people are not allowed back into the ER because of COVID. So not saying that COVID's good, but this makes that a little easier right now. But seriously, make up anything. You are the authority figure in there, so you can most likely get them out. If they're not willing to talk about it, they're not willing to talk about it still. So all you can do is build rapport, tell them I'm concerned for your safety. Like, I see this injury, this type of fracture doesn't really match your story, and I want to make sure that you're safe because I'm concerned about you, and build that rapport with them. Again, if they don't want to talk, that is their choice. You can't force them to talk, but you're at least someone who told them that they matter and that you're concerned for their safety. And then provide them with a phone number. They might not be able to take a card with them, like a hotline card or that pamphlet you have for the WCA, but you can at least give them a phone number and somewhere to look up to say, these people are really great. They will help you at your own pace. You don't have to report anything, and they're going to cater their services to whatever makes sense for you, like in your safety. That's the best you can do. The other thing I would say to health providers too is, like, you know, when you're doing your screenings, every time you see a patient and you're going, are you, you know, and one of them is like, are you safe at home? Are you experiencing abuse? Please, for the love of God, don't do this. All right, so now I have to ask you this question. Are you safe at home? Don't say that, because what that says to them is like, I really don't want to ask you this question, and I really don't want to know because I don't know how to handle it. So, you know, when you're doing those intakes, you're doing those questionnaires, try to make it more of a conversation. When you ask that question, ask it directly and confidently. It's kind of like when you go through those suicide questions. You know, you don't want to be like, so you're not thinking of harming yourself, are you? You want to be like, are you thinking about suicide, or are you thinking about killing yourself? You know, you want to ask very directly, because it says, I'm able to talk about this. Was that helpful? I hope it was. Okay, good. Any other questions or concerns that I can help you with at this time? I'm sorry we went about 7 minutes over. I'm not surprised. That is my MO. But if you have any questions for me at all, Sarah has my information, and will certainly provide it for you. Also, I can change my name to my email address real quick, actually. Maybe that would be. There we go. So now you have my email address, and also if you missed that, you can get it from Sarah.
It's not showing up on the slide, Jackie, but I can get that to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not on the slide. I'm sorry. That's just our general information. But yeah, you can also get it from Sarah as well. And I hope this was helpful. And if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email, or you can call my work extension, or just ask for me. If you call our office number, they'll get you. And I will answer any questions you have. And if I can't, I'll get you to who can.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. Can we all give her a round of applause? You can do the virtual clap sign. Yeah. No, I really appreciate you being here. And I know it's hard. This is a topic that really we should be having ongoing conversations all the time. This isn't like I had this talk, 10 years ago and we know everything. And so I acknowledge it's hard to fit that also into a 1 hour time frame. Yes. You probably do have other questions. So reach out, like Jackie said, to herself, reach out to me and I can connect you with her. You may also have other people that you feel safer reaching out to. So maybe it's your faculty member, maybe it's your advisor, maybe it's someone else that you have a close relationship, and you can reach out to that person for support, because there are a lot of people, different people we have in our lives. So I think that's the message. The takeaway point is to be informed, find out what we can do to help. We want to support our patients. We don't want to make them, or our clients, and not make them at more risk, but there are things that we can do. And that's what I think is so great, Jackie, with those bystander intervention pieces. There's like the different, like direct and distract and all those different things too. So the interruption is nice. I've done that before as well. Actually, I was at a bar once and I saw some girl who had way too much to drink and a guy trying to take advantage. I just went up and pretended like I knew her. And she was so gone, she didn't know who I was. And he was like, oh, Cindy, I haven't seen you. And I put myself right in between. And he just got tired of it and walked away, and left her be. So just be looking for those opportunities. Make sure you're safe. Like you said, make sure you're not going to reaching between a guy throwing a punch and you get hit. But just be aware of those things. And we all know if someone's acting that way in public, what must it be like behind closed doors? Those behaviors are going to be even worse when we can't see it. So I appreciate you being here, Jackie. As always, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you to everybody for coming online and on campus, and we will be in touch soon.
Thank you again. I love coming out, favorite part of my job. So please call me for this kind of presentation all day, every day. And it's been a pleasure to always work with you. So you all have a wonderful night, and reach out if you need anything.